This is Jeannie Green. Welcome to the second hour of the Alaska Intertribal Council's 9th Annual Convention. This is an historic airing. For the first time, the Alaska Intertribal Convention is aired statewide, an opportunity for all to share in the tribal rights of our state. This year's themes, government to government, tribes taking action.
We're all in a new time frame, the year 2000, and I would like to call on everyone across the state, the Native people, the governor, the legislature, the citizens, to look afresh at the issues and the problems, and to exercise sensitivity, respect, caring, and compassion.
Yaigi tunachayim nachistete chadasat gedi evtisine dikian pao chadege hanahu ha yaigi tunach chawaso tuskede ikhande nachtoade nakha dikian pao chahakich hakachi nachtakhet kadusko yaigi tunach yagola chishe daika.
Now, the villages with VPOs are in even a much worse situation. VPOs generally have no training at all, and their turnover rate exceeds, in many years, 100% annually. That means that, again, even those that have received a little training are turned over. So there you have the VPOs. They're the same as the citizens right out here, most of you, with absolutely no law enforcement training, and yet they're supposed to go in and protect the villages. Well, it's no wonder that they do the best they can, they're not succeeding. Now, a commissioner of the Department of Public Safety for Alaska just a few years ago said, quote, "No Caucasian community would tolerate this situation. They would challenge it as, quote, a violation of equal protection under law." Well, that's just what the Alaska Intertribal Council has done. They have sued the state of Alaska and charged them with violating equal protection under law. The pre-trial proceedings will be concluded by the middle of the summer. We expect the trial to occur next fall and have a decision sometime next winter. That's the AITC case. One other case is a suit by 5 tribes, 5 Chugach tribes, Eyak, Titlik, Chiniga, Nanwalek, and Port Graham, asserting Aboriginal hunting and fishing rights to the Outer Continental Shelf, that is the area beyond the state's 3-mile limit. I think you all know that ANCSCA only extinguished Aboriginal title within Alaska, and the Supreme Court of the United States says that just means out to the 3-mile limit. So there has been no law extinguishing Aboriginal rights out in the ocean water. Now, this case started 4 years ago when Bob Heinrichs, the president of EAC, called about a scallop trawler that was called Mr. Big, appropriately, was out there just raping the scallop fields within the Aboriginal territories of the EAC. And, but this latest case is only the last in a string of cases that started 18 years ago in 1982 by the Inupiat community of the Arctic Slope, which brought basically the same issue, asserting Aboriginal rights to the Outer Continental Shelf. And there's been a string of cases, but no court has ever finally resolved the issue, and we finally have got a case, I think, that one way or the other, it's going to resolve it. Now, the only difference between this case and the former cases is the former cases, the tribes claim exclusive Aboriginal rights within their traditional territory. We lost the issue of exclusivity, and so we're only claiming non-exclusive fishing rights. But they are still very important because a non-exclusive fishing right beyond the 3-mile limit would mean that coastal villages could go fishing for halibut or black cod without IFQs. So it can, for so many villages that lost or didn't get limited entry permits or didn't get IFQs, it could be very, very important to their economy. We expect this to be tried in the spring or fall. We won't try it in the summer because too many of our witnesses will be engaged in subsistence, and we expect a decision next fall or winter. And just like all of the real big-time lawyers in Florida refuse to predict success, I've always predicted success, but many times I've been wrong, so this time I'm not. But I'll leave it up to Heather to carry on here.
I'm going to be fairly short here today as well. Most of you know that the major subsistence case that's pending right now is the Katie John case that will be argued December 20th before an en-banc court, Ninth Circuit Court in San Francisco. An en-banc court means that a majority of the judges that sit for the Ninth Circuit have voted to rehear this case. So the case will be argued before 11 judges. Now, when this case was accepted for review on bank, we filed a motion for Katie John asking the court to apply the law of the case and essentially adopt the prior decision. And the court refused to do so, but in the process of entering its order denying our request, they revealed who the en-banc court is. So we know who our panel is. We know who the 11 judges are, and we're very, very optimistic that we have an excellent panel of judges that will be hearing this case. One judge in particular, although he's fairly conservative and he was a Reagan appointee, he is very familiar with INILCA. He has authored 2 opinions, one in the Knightsey case and another Alexander case, and he did an excellent job in both those cases in his understanding of the statute and its application to subsistence uses in Alaska. Now, this case is extremely important, as you know, because it will determine whether or not Title VIII's priority for subsistence uses extends to fisheries in navigable waters. And fisheries are obviously a subsistence resource that Alaska Natives are very dependent upon, and Congress certainly knew that at the time that it enacted the statute. The state nevertheless contends that state regulation is over these navigable waters and precludes federal regulation over these waters. The state had 5 amicus briefs submitted in support of their position. One was by the Alaska Legislative Council, which has been actively involved in litigation against the tribes in a series of cases, Venati being one of them. Another amicus brief was filed by a group of inholders, individuals, and that brief was brought by the Alaskans for Constitutional Rights, something like that. A group of states filed an amicus brief on behalf of state. Altogether 5 briefs. Because of the number of briefs that were filed in support of the state, the Ninth Circuit allowed us to file an additional brief in response to those amicus briefs. And in doing so, likewise allowed the state to file an additional brief. Their brief, in fact, is due today. So the briefing will be concluded today, and then both sides will be working towards preparation for the oral argument, which will be just 1 hour. Big issue like this, it's hard to imagine coming boiled down to 1 hour, but that's what it will be. The federal government supports Katie John's position this round and will be arguing in favor of the interpretation of the statute. The federal government, however, has raised an issue at this time on appeal that may have the effect of what's called mooting out this case. And what that means is that the federal government has brought to the attention of the court the fact that the state's initial challenge was to regulations that are no longer in place. Those regulations have been superseded by the federal agency's more recent regulations that went into effect last year. That's a technical issue, but it's one that the court may find removes the its subject matter jurisdiction over this case. If the court decides to take seriously this mootness argument, what it may do is throw the case out, vacate the prior opinion, and tell the state to go back down and litigate, bring its challenge in federal court against the federal government based upon the current regulations. Now, that will have its silver lining, its good points, and potentially its bad points. It's ironic in the sense that poor Katie John has been litigating this issue for nearly 15 years, first in state courts and then in the federal courts, and there's still no resolution to this. If the case is vacated and the state is required to bring its litigation anew, the silver lining in that, and there are several of them, will be that the current federal regulations will remain in place. The status quo will be federal authority over those waters that the federal agencies have identified as being within their jurisdiction. And the state's ability to challenge that will be much more difficult. The standard of review will be much more deferential to the agency interpretation. The other silver lining in this would be the fact that it would not be before the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, the United States Supreme Court, would not have an opportunity to take the issue up on review. And as you know, the Supreme Court is not very friendly to tribal issues. We never like to see a case go up before them. On the other side, I am of the view that we are never going to get a better panel than what we currently have. And if the court deals directly with the merits of this case, I have no doubts whatsoever that we are going to win. Our arguments are absolutely solid. Congress knew what it was doing when it adopted Title VIII of ANILCA. It intended to preserve the subsistence way of life. So, as Lare said, it's hard to know what the outcome is here. Of those two possibilities that I can point to, I don't think one of them is that we are going to lose this case. I honestly don't think so. The court may decide, as I said, to vacate the prior decision and make the state start all over again, but I cannot accept the thought at this time that this is a case that we are going to lose before the Ninth Circuit. In any event, I hope that each and every one of you will be sending your thoughts and your prayers towards Katie John as we go do battle on her behalf December 20th before the Ninth Circuit Court in San Francisco. Another case that I'll bring to your attention is a case that many people are referring to as John v. Baker II. John v. Baker was the case that was determined in state court by the state Supreme Court, and it dealt with whether or not the state court should recognize and give comity to tribal court decrees in custody issues with respect to tribal children. And in that historic case, the state Supreme Court reversed some of its prior case law that held that tribes don't exist in Alaska and formally recognized that the federal government has recognized tribes in Alaska and held that the lower courts, if due process has been granted, must give comity, must recognize the validity of tribal court decrees over members. That case did not, however, deal specifically with children under the Indian Child Welfare Act, and the case that is currently before the court does. So we view this next case, and it's come out of the interior, out of the TCC region, as being the next segue that will hopefully establish in a positive fashion state recognition of tribal powers over children, and particularly children within the framework of the Indian Child Welfare Act. There are some important questions that the court will look at here. And once again, the state of Alaska has decided that it is going to urge the court to support the views of the tribes, that tribes do have jurisdiction over their children in ICWA cases. Remember, in Venati, the court left open the question of whether or not Alaska Native allotments and town sites constitute Indian country under the two-part test that was articulated in the Venati case. We believe that those forms of land do constitute Indian country. The state got wind of this case and moved to intervene, as did the Legislative Council, and AITC also entered a motion of conditional intervention, meaning that if the court decides to grant the state its motion to intervene and get involved, we have asked the court to likewise allow AITC to voice its views so that we hopefully can bring some balance to the debate, to the discussion that will take place in that federal court. The particular judge, this case has been filed in the District of Columbia, and the judge that's overseeing that case is one that has a reputation for taking his time. Nothing has moved very quickly there, and so although our motions were filed sometime early fall, we still haven't received word from the court whether or not they're going to be granted. Nonetheless, that's an important case. It will determine the outcome of the remaining Indian country in Alaska, and we are watching that case very carefully. A final case to just update you upon is the English-only case. That case was brought last year after the November election, after the initiative was passed by 60% of the Alaskan voters that voted in favor of passing this initiative that would require English and English only to be spoken by government employees. Of course, that would have major ramifications in rural Alaska, where oftentimes government is conducted in Yupik or Inuit or Gwich'in. But this initiative would require all state employees to speak in English and English only. We brought suit on behalf of quite a number of individuals, and the court, the case was brought in Dillingham. Judge Teresi immediately granted us an injunction. And during the process of what's called summary judgment motions, the a national group that has been putting a lot of money into various states to push this English only has attempted to intervene, as well as an Alaska-based group that was very involved in promoting the initiative in the first place. And we opposed their intervention, and the Judge Teresi granted the local group their ability to intervene, but denied the national group's ability to intervene. That case has pretty much been quiet because the attorneys that represented the local group had a lot on their plates, and they asked for an extension of time. So we've only recently received their opposition to our motion for summary judgment. We will have until March to reply, and then the Superior Court, Judge Teresi in Dillingham, will enter his order sometime next summer, next fall. That's a case that we feel very, very confident that we are going to win. The initiative is unconstitutional under state law, under federal law, and we have no doubt that we're going to prevail on that case. So that's the wrap up of the active litigation that is ongoing now. Thank you very much.
I like the government-to-government relations. It's a good thing, and it needs to be implemented and educate these other various entities, educate them about the government-to-government programs and how you consult with each other and consult with the tribes and the different entities and work together. When you do work together and understand these issues and where you can go and solve problems, it makes it a lot better.
And then recently, the president just signed a new executive order 13175, which you can get on the BIA website if you haven't already seen that. Basically, that executive order builds upon the executive order that was passed in 1998, or that was signed by the president. And this one, I think, has a little more teeth, and it follows up in some good ways. It requires early, regular, and meaningful consultation and collaboration with tribes. And in signing the order, the president said, "I reaffirm our commitment to tribal sovereignty, self-determination, and self-government." The order requires the agencies to respect tribal self-government and sovereignty and give tribal governments the maximum administrative discretion possible. It also requires agencies to consult with tribal officials in determining the need for federal standards before they're even considered. It requires each agency to submit the description of the agency's consultation process to the White House and to appoint an official for each agency to ensure that this is implemented. It prevents agencies from drafting regulations that impose substantial costs to tribes without discussing it with the tribes first and getting their permission. And it prevents agencies from drafting regulations that preempt tribal law or tribal policy. And this is a big one, I think, it prevents agencies from submitting legislation to Congress that would be inconsistent with tribal policies. Finally, the order requires officials in the White House to confer with tribes and ensure the order is being properly implemented within 180 days after it is signed. And that was, I don't know, must have been almost a month ago that was signed. I think this order sets a strong precedent no matter who's in the White House, and it will make a big difference. And we in Alaska want to make sure that it is implemented. And so what I'm working on right now with our agencies, the Department of Interior agencies, is an umbrella government-to-government policy for Alaska for the Department of Interior. And copies of that draft are available out on the registration.
Well, it's good to be here today. I'd like to thank Alaska Intertribal Council for allowing me to speak here. I'm going to speak on health care. Our tribe has taken over control of our own health care. It started back in 1993, and things were as bad as they could be then. There wasn't much going on with our tribe, and we not only had one council, we had two councils, and they were battling over who was the real council. So the BIA came in and set up an election, and everybody agreed whoever was elected would be the council. And I thought that was a pretty good idea, and then some people came to me and said, "You're not on the old council or the distant council, we want you to run." And I didn't want to do it, but when your family asks for help, you got to jump in. So I ran, and I was elected with 4 distant council members and no old council members. And all the 4 distant council members were women. And they told everybody they were going to get rid of me. Well, I want to tell you now that they're all gone. But our health care wasn't too good, and I'll start with the prescriptions. Our prescription money was given to the local drugstore, and the 3rd or 4th of the month, they ran out of money. So if you wanted to get prescriptions, you had to be first in line or you didn't get them paid for. This was real hard on our elders, the ones that needed chronic medication every month. If they weren't first in line, they either went without or they took their food money and bought their prescriptions. And a lot of people wouldn't use the prescription money because they knew the elders needed it. So the first thing I did was I talked to the druggist, and he wouldn't cut us a deal, so I went and talked to Costco, and I went down and told him, well, we're going to switch to Costco. And he flipped out, and the local doctors flipped out, and they raised all kinds of hell with us. And I never did figure out why, but I heard rumors there were kickbacks involved. We switched our prescriptions to Costco, and we never ran out of money again. Our prescriptions were paid for not 3 or 4 days out of the month, 30 days out of the month. Now we're with ANMC Pharmacy, and we get even a better deal. And that was just from somebody taking an interest in going negotiating a better deal. So, and I didn't think it was a big thing, but I had some of our elders come up to me and they really thanked me for doing it because they didn't have to worry about getting their prescriptions in. So we turned our attention to the hospital. Our care was operated under contract health care with a local hospital. They had a doctor's clinic and a hospital. Our money ran out about the 10th of the month at the hospital and the doctor's clinic, and they put a sign up that said, no more Indian Health Service funds this month. I had a new administrator in there, and he came running over and said that, you know, we could probably work this out. So we cut a deal with him, and for the same amount of money, we got health care 30 days out of the month at the hospital and the doctor's office, and all it took was some negotiating. They were stealing our money. They weren't doing any third-party billings. You remember the movies in the Western movies where they had reservations where the Indian agent was stealing the money and buying rotten beef and rotten food for the people on the reservation? That's what they were doing there. And a lot of the people in town were angry that we would think of starting a clinic because it would damage the hospital. And they would talk against us, and I always call that kind of thinking old white man syndrome, that they know what's best for us and we don't. How dare we go out and try to do something for ourselves? But those days have changed, and you know, we've served notice on the town that they better get used to it because we're going to do whatever we think is best. We're not there to support their businesses. Our tribal council changed over the years, and we have 5 commercial fishermen on there. And if anybody knows commercial fishermen, you know that they're always very impatient. When those bids came in February, in March our council met and we decided we wanted that clinic built. We were tired of all the BS, and our instructions were, you know, just do what you had to do to get it built. So we fired all the consultants. We rejected all the bids. We encouraged our executive director to resign. We replaced him with a consultant that had worked with us for quite a while. His name is Bruce Kane. He came on board in April. We hired a nurse practitioner named Kathy Edwards, and we told them, get this clinic built. We want it now, and do whatever you got to do. They took off and started building under force account in May. We hired a local construction company to mentor us on the how to do it, and they started. The work started in May. One of the things that happened on the way was the local sheetrockers put bids of $39,000 and $35,000 in to do the sheetrock. We told them we thought it was high, and they said, well, if you had to bring anybody in to do it, that's what you'd have to pay. So we brought somebody in for $27,000, and they paid their own room and board and got it done. And you have to do that to tune up the local contractors so they don't think they can rip you off all the time. In August, we opened our clinic, and it's been operating ever since. And one thing that happened, which I never thought was going to come to an end, is we actually closed out our HUD Community Block Grant, and that thing was a nightmare. I never thought we were going to get that closed out. We closed that out a month or two ago. And our clinic is working well. Our tribe supports the idea of having our own clinic. We got a lot of support from our regional nonprofit, Chugashmute, and the other tribes in our region. They support us because they feel that we're breaking ground for a path that they may want to travel later. It seemed like when we started in 1993, 1994, it seemed like that was 1,000 meetings ago, and to tell you the truth, it probably was. But it worked out well, and we're happy to share our experiences and knowledge with the rest of our tribes in the region and with other tribes in Alaska, and you can do it, and you will end up with better health care. We are one of the major employees in Cordova now, employers. We have a major economic impact on our town, and we're gaining respect just because of the money trip. So.
Sorry. Bob's not finished yet. We've got an emergency. If we have Michael Dunlap in the house, your wife is in labor and is on the phone now, and she's on hold. Congratulations.
Actually, I am just about done, and I can't tell you how proud I am of our tribal council for just kicking over the traces and saying the hell with it. We need to get this done, no matter how we got to do it. And I'm real glad I'm part of that council. So that's all I got to say.
Talking about military cleanup, let me take you back to how we got started. In Galena, the military base there started they started building it in 1942. And in 1945, the airplanes started coming in. The military base was constructed mainly for Lend-Lease program during the war. And in those days, they brought in their fuels and materials for operations in bulk. And by bulk, I mean 55-gallon barrels. So in 1945, they had a major flood there in Galena. And the dike around the air base there at that time was only about 4 feet high, and the water got up somewhere around 15 feet. And there was somewhere in the neighborhood of about 250,000 barrels there in Galena. And you can imagine what happened when the water exceeded the height of the dike. We had barrels in the back of Galena and all the way down from Galena to the mouth of the Yukon. In 1993, the base started downsizing because of the threat of the Cold War was no longer there. And the military said, well, there's very little environmental harm, and we said BS. So we went to the EPA and AEDC. We got everybody together to talk about this issue, and we found, I believe it was something like 60 sites there right in Galena that was possible hazardous environmental issues there. We have a large flume that's right under the military base with it's on top of the water table with a lot of fuel there. We've got numerous environmental sites there that are hazardous. It's ironic that the Air Force should say, there was no environmental dangers, because within the last 50 years or so, I know right there around home, there's been a lot of deaths due to cancer, where there was no, prior to the base being there with the environmental hazards, you hardly ever heard of cancer. So these things, you know, was a major concern to us. In 1997, I believe it was, the council decided, well, we need to do something about it. So we started a for-profit arm called Ucana Development Company to take on the environmental issues of the base there. And we've been working with the Air Force hand in hand, government to government, struggling like hell, but still pushing on to try to eradicate some of the environmental sites we have there in Lena. And it's not been an easy task because, as you know, fighting with the federal government, fighting with the state government is an ongoing battle, which will be ongoing probably till we're gone. But we've been doing real good. In fact, just 2 weeks ago, our for-profit arm, Ucana Development Company, went down to St. Paul, Minnesota, and received one of the 8 Honoring the Nations Award. And we are, I believe, the first Alaskan entity to be so honored. And you know, it just takes the persistence of a good council and a good working group. And I just have to say, you know, I am very proud of my council. They're sticking by me, and they're not always doing what I tell them to do, but, you know, that's to be seen. Anyway, but they are a good working group. That's what you need. You need consistency to keep these issues going, you know, and that's what we're doing. I was prepared to show a 17-minute video, but they cut me down and said, you got 5 to 10 minutes, and then you'll have to answer a lot of questions. So I think my 5 minutes are up, and once again, I want to thank AITC for inviting me. Thank you kindly.
The issues that we face today in the tribal courts are dramatic. They're way heavy on the minds of people that work with the problems that we have to deal with. The children, the families, the need for education on what it means to be a responsible member of a head of a household. We cannot continue to let our grandparents be the raisers of our children. The folks suffering from the destructive characteristics of alcoholism, these neat people are our greatest treasure. They need to be helped and touched and given the love and support that is needed. They have fallen through the cracks of the various systems in the villages and in Western society. The people on the streets, how many of you turn your head to the side as you walk through this city? The people that have lost everything, and they're in a stage of hopelessness and despair. These are our people, our relatives. They're somebody's brother, they're somebody's sister. The time has come for us to take initiative and do the work that is necessary for us to continue. The time has come for us to receive the respect in our position on the international level, on the world level. We have a spot on this planet. We were put here for a reason, and nobody has the right to take that away from us by virtue of our Creator. As time goes on in the development of tribal courts, you're going to see a significant amount of development and watchdogging by the state of Alaska and the federal government on the decisions that we make. These decisions that are made in our tribal courts need to be written down. We need to be able to network with each other. We need to have intertribal courts. We need to be able to have pro tem judging for areas of conflicts of interest. In many of our areas, we're small. We're related to everyone. We have to educate each other and share, be able to understand what our values and our traditions are and incorporate them into our codes and ordinances so they reflect who we are. We define who we are through this process. In many instances, in the Western tradition, when you put down something on paper, it is, in the law world, it is considered the highest form of law. We have traditionally done our law from an oral tradition. So we've had to catch up, and we've had to design judicial systems according to who we are from our past to ensure the fact that we will have a future.
Properly introduce myself. A lot of people ask me when they come up to me, where are you from? I'll properly introduce myself now. My name is Deborah Vo. My parents are Fred and Domitilla Ahlstrom from St. Mary's, Alaska. I was born and raised in St. Mary's on the lower Yukon River. I'm the youngest of 10 children, come from a very large family. I've been living here in Anchorage for the past 4 years. Of those 4, 3 wonderful years working as Executive Director for the Alaska Intertribal Council. This year has been a very, very busy year for Alaska Intertribal Council. All the tribes that we have connected are connected to our domain name, which is AITC.org. Alaska Intertribal Council has a web page. It's www.aitc.org. And all our tribes that are connected onto the system have the domain name AITC.org. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to send a mass email out to the tribes at aitc.org, and then the subject, I am going to call it ATAP, and my message is going to be, we are bridging the digital divide in Indian country! Exclamation point. I'm just going to go and send this out. And what it does is it goes and it sends it out. And what we do, a message will come back and saying that the message has been sent out. And we've been very fortunate to have tribes who have actually connected onto the system. We've gotten several emails and a lot of positive feedback and are very thankful. In particular, I want to mention a comment that was made by George Smith from Scammon Bay, which is a small coastal community out on the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. And he was just absolutely appreciative of the ability for their tribe to click on every morning and just see the world come to their screen. He said it greatly improved their reporting and efficiency for their grants, and he's able to respond a lot faster.
During the presidential election, when I was watching during the night, it dragged on, and Tim Russer of the television said, Florida, Florida, Florida. And I said, tribal sovereignty, tribal sovereignty, tribal sovereignty. We have fine tribal leaders that have that have put their time, the executive committee, and at this time, I would like for the AITC Executive Council to stand up and be recognized at this time. AITC Executive Council. And these people have done a lot of work, and give them thanks. Without them, I would not have not made any strides in my travels to DC and to all of the meetings that occur in our land here. Again, I want to extend a warm welcome to the tribal leaders and guests who have come together to attend this 9th annual convention of the Alaska Intertribal Council. Government-to-government tribes take an action. It has been an honor again to serve as your chairman this past year. The year 2000 has been a busy year for tribes in Alaska, one in which we have truly taken action. As you may recall, at last year's convention, Governor Tony Knowles announced his invitation to Alaska's tribes to begin government-to-government talks between the state of Alaska and Alaska's 227 federally recognized tribes to set a foundation in which both sovereigns can sit down in a respectful manner and discuss how they can work together for the betterment of the tribes and others here in Alaska. In February, Alaska's tribal leaders met and accepted the governor's invitation to begin discussions. The tribes chose their 48-member team along with their co-chair, my Southeast brother, Joe Williams. Together with the governor's team, which comprises of his 12-member cabinet, and their co-chair, Bruce Patello, it has become known as a State Tribal Relations Team. The team has met for 3 plenary sessions, and we are embarking on the 4th plenary session scheduled for tomorrow. On September 29th, Governor Knowles signed Administrative Order 186, recognizing Alaska's 227 federally recognized tribes. Since the recognition, the state and tribal teams have been meeting to put together a millennium agreement, one that would set the foundation for future improvements in communication and working together. My fellow tribal leaders, this is tribes taking action. Tribes exercising their sovereign power by sitting down with the state, discussing how to work together for the future of our tribes and others here in Alaska. I want to make one thing clear. Even though we may not agree with the state of Alaska on issues such as equal funding for our rural schools, equal funding for police protection, which I am involved in a lawsuit against the state, and protecting our hunting and fishing rights, we still can work together as sovereigns and move forward on other issues and concerns that we share in common. This year, AITC sponsored the 3rd annual We the People March in support of our hunting and fishing rights. We continue to support Katie John, the Mentasta elder who has and continues to fight to feed herself and her family, as her ancestors have done for thousands of years. On December 20, Heather Kendall-Miller of the Native American Rights Fund, who represents Katie, will go before the 9th Circuit Court of Appeals to again argue the right to fish and feed our families. That the state of Alaska, to the state of Alaska, don't mess with Katie. In June, AITC co-hosted the National Congress of American Indians mid-year session in Juneau with our Southeast friends, the Central Council of Tlingit and Haida Indians. As your representatives for Alaska, I sit on the executive board of NCAI, bringing our issues and concerns to the national level. Our voices must be stronger at the national level, and we can achieve if all tribes in Alaska become members of NCAI. I urge your councils to seriously consider joining the oldest national Indian organization, one that can reap benefits for Alaska's tribes if we make our voices heard. In September, AITC participated in the Alaska Federation of Natives Forum on Subsistence. I have extended an invitation to the leaders of AFN to meet jointly with the Executive Council of AITC, and we have agreed to do so within the coming months. This meeting will allow our leaders to discuss how we can both work together on issues and at the same time understanding each other's roles and responsibilities. During the September visit to Washington, D.C., we were able to visit with our congressional delegation and key staff members of the White House to inform them about Alaska's tribal issues. We also met with other organizations who have been friends to Alaska's tribal issues. In October, I participated at the annual convention of the Alaska Federation of Natives, bringing the tribal perspective in their theme of our place in 21st century, as we discuss our tribal rights with leaders from the other indigenous nations. Earlier this month, the National Congress of American Indians held their annual convention in St. Paul, Minnesota. I was pleased to see a growing number of tribal leaders from Alaska attend this national convention. As I mentioned earlier, Alaska's tribes can benefit from this forum if they become members and bring their issues to the national level. This past year, AITC Executive Council passed a resolution in support of getting Alaska representation on the National American Indian Judges Court Association. We were successful in getting 4 seats on this national board. As tribes develop their tribal court capacities to deal with the issues of child and family welfare, alcohol enforcement, and natural resource management, it is important to participate in national forums that address these very issues. I strongly encourage tribes to become involved at the national level, especially as it deals with tribal courts. It opens opportunities for tribes and should be taken advantage of. And we heard this morning from the judge that made a presentation, and I really appreciate his efforts to really put Alaska in a forefront, and as well as untiring work of Kimberly Martis. Before closing, I would like to extend my thanks to John Echohawk, Executive Director of the Native American Rights Fund, for their continuing support to our very important tribal issues here in Alaska, and to Heather Kendall-Miller for her perseverance and dedication to protecting our rights on behalf of all of Indian country. It has been an honor to serve on the North Board for the last 4 years. As I begin the last stretch in serving my last 2 years on the board, I would greatly appreciate it if all tribes here would make plans to contribute funds to help to make things happen in Alaska. Again, NARF has been there for us. I would also like to thank Rural Cap and Janine Kennedy for their support of tribal governments, and to Vernita Herdman for her strong support at advocating for our tribal rights. We are now embarking on the new millennium. It is my hope that the Alaska's tribes will continue to become stronger by exercising their governmental powers to better the lives of our children and their grandchildren. Since the birth of the Alaska Intertribal Council 8 years ago by Alaska's tribes, we have managed to become noticeable in statewide and national arenas. I would like to express my thanks to our member tribes who have continued to support AITC by becoming members. I encourage non-members tribes to join this organization because the stronger we are in numbers, the stronger our voice can be. Again, it has truly been an honor to serve as your chairman, and I wish you the best of everything in whatever you do as tribal governments. And in closing, this afternoon, I will have a sobriety pledge list that we as tribal leaders need to pledge ourselves to be strong and sober. And those pledges that I've been gathering over the years on the Iditarod Trail, I will continue to do that and to have sober and healthy communities and educated communities, both in our native cultures and languages. And I just really feel that we have an opportunity to restore a lot of things that we have lost over these years. And you as tribal leaders are in positions to really address that in your communities. So again, thank you for your continued support and look forward in many more years ahead in our work. And I think it's a lifetime work for us. And stay involved, stay focused, and happy trails and whatever trails you may go through. I know I'm going to go through another beautiful Indian country that I see every year through the Iditarod, and I see that very awesome, very beautiful Indian country. And again, thank you very much, and have a very good day, and Boyana.
With the closing remarks of Chairman Mike Williams, the Alaska Intertribal Council's 9th Annual Convention, the theme this year, Government to Government, Tribes Taking Action, comes to a close. This is Jeannie Green of Heartbeat, Alaska. I am honored to bring you this 2-hour special, and we thank Alaska Intertribal Council for sponsoring this special. On behalf of Alaska Intertribal Council and all its members, we thank you for joining us for this historic airing of the 9th Annual Convention.